Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting of October 7th. We'll start by calling the roll.
Item number 1, roll call. President Fay.
Here.
Commissioner Jasmine.
Here.
Commissioner Katikian.
Here.
Commissioner Laurie.
Here.
And Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Item number 2, consent items.
We have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I make the motion to accept it.
Second.
Okay, great. Is there any opposition? Okay, great.
Item number 3, Glendale Water Commission staff comments.
Good afternoon, President Fay, members of the Commission. Manny Robledo, Interim General Manager, here to give you a couple of update reports. First of all, this is Public Power Week, and it's designated nationally as a way to celebrate community-owned resources, community-owned utilities such as Glendale Water and Power that serve our customers instead of our shareholders. So we're community-owned, we're customer-focused, we provide reliable energy at competitive, less than our neighboring investor-owned utility price. And we also give back to the community by being responsive. Commission meetings like this type of input isn't generally given statewide, because statewide you have to travel to San Francisco and probably not be heard. Here we are very responsive and do our best to serve the community. So we're taking this week to celebrate. We have some internal recognition meetings of our staff, but just wanted to make that announcement about Public Power Week. We have a more extensive report prepared for our summer peak, but just a few highlights about that. We did meet it without the Grayson Power Plant. We were fortunate that all of our transmission facilities were intact, and we brought the power in. And we did it also, once the power's here, we have to distribute it. So we fared very well with regard to distribution outages, some minor transformer outages from, say, pole-top transformers that feed several houses. Sometimes they get overloaded with so much air conditioning use, but we did our best to get people back in service as quickly as possible. We did have one transformer outage at a substation that was a little bit more problematic. We did serve the customers by switching in the field, but for several afternoons they were interrupted until we could get the spare transformer in place. But I'm happy to report that we made it through, and now we're into cooler weather, and we're everybody's in service, doing well. Likewise, water the water system has very few outages, but things are operating really well in the water system too. We completed an inventory of lead piping that was required by the EPA, and happy to report that we have no lead facilities in our system. That was something that came down as a mandate from the feds, so we completed that and we're in compliance with that order. Likewise, in the water system, we are reviewing a couple of initiatives. One is expanding the reclaimed water or recycled water. So we have proposals in to develop a master plan for recycled water to increase the usage of recycled water and therefore freeing up the potable water for other uses. It's mostly in irrigation, but so we're going to look at what we can do to accommodate those. It's usually the distribution system or getting that type of water separately from the potable water that costs the money, and it's it can only be done in certain ways that's economically. So we have somebody looking at that. We're reviewing a proposal to look at that. Likewise, our water system itself has varying age of or vintage of pipeline mains, and we want to develop a master plan for systematic replacement of infrastructure so that we don't get a whole bunch of stuff failing at once. And then cost of service analysis, that'll be coming up next year, I think, for the water system. With regard to summer itself, the air conditioning use produces high usage and therefore high energy bills and high electric bills. So we're looking at ways to kind of help our customers get through that. And a couple of things we've done, we actually took something to City Council to enhance the energy efficiency rebates for air conditioning and other electric appliances to have sustained reduction of energy, therefore reduction in bills. And we're also linking a low-income program to help, we have approximately 10,000 low-income customers, help them with their summer bills. And also a thing called budget billing or level pay plan that would kind of allow the customers to pay the same amount for 11 months and then have 1 month where they adjust to the next year, and so that they don't really get the high summer bills. They just know that's what they call budget billing, because you pay based on a budget with an annual true-up. We're working on electric vehicle and solar infrastructure here in Glendale. We have our solar complex, solar project and EV charging project is underway. In fact, the electric vehicle charging at that location will be done in November. We have 5 level 2 chargers and 1 fast charger, that level 3 charger that'd be available to the community. And the construction of the solar project should start in December, so we're making progress there. Hopefully that'll be available for next summer. We've had a community meeting this month, and we had a Spar Heights public, and then we're going to have another meeting with the Parks Commission to talk about this project, but also a tree planting incentive. We have another site called the Brown Landfill, and that one is environmental review. We completed biological investigation, but we're still in the environmental phase of that. In total, our projects that we have owned by Glendale would amount to 5 megawatts total. In addition to the sports complex, there are also city-owned electric vehicle charging stations underway. But we've taken a look at not only the ones that we own, but also the ones owned by private operators. It turns out we have 78 city-owned charging stations, and there are 153 non-city-owned that people just look at locations they think could make a going concern, and they put up the money, put in the charger, and we serve them electricity. There's a total of 11,000 electric vehicles, 11,600 electric vehicles. So if you look at the ratio of chargers to electric vehicle, we're about 50 right now. If you take our own charging and then the charging that's done private operators. So by adding more chargers owned by the city and then encouraging private operators, we have a target of getting that down to between 10 and 20. So that's our goal for that. One of the things we're going to do is an RFP for curbside charging, where we have a private operator come in and hopefully use our street lighting to provide curbside charging, and also additional fast chargers that for residents that don't have the means to charge at home, they can get a charge in 20 minutes or so, 20 minutes to half an hour. But again, those are quite costly, and they require a lot of load during the day because someone is in a car, they're not going to charge at night. Residential chargers usually charge at night because we have an incentive to do so, but someone that is out and about, kind of like when you fill up for gasoline, you want it quickly, and we have to accommodate those during the day. It would add to our peak. But those are some plans that we have. Grayson Power Plant, the demolition has been completed, and the engineer is about 90% complete. We're still on track for a 2026 commercial operation date. The biogas project at the Shoal landfill, they're working on the foundations right now, and that's still scheduled for a summer 2025 operation date. Finally, based on the comments of the last commission meeting, we're planning on bringing back a few key performance indicators per division. So we'll have some for electric, some for water, some for power, some for finance, some for customer service. Just as a flavor of how we're doing, it's going to be in conjunction with our annual report. We finished our fiscal year June 30th, so we'll have some indication of how we did last year and also some key performance indicators. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Yes. So with the electric charging, have you looked at any programs for apartments, condos, that type of thing, to encourage electric vehicle charging there? Because I know some people that would love to buy an electric car, but they're like, well, I live in an apartment, so I can't charge my car. And so I'm wondering if there's any programs that can be developed for that.
There are two ways to do that. One is I call the gas station approach, where you go and you charge for 20 minutes and then you're on your way, much like we have gasoline. But the other way is working with the owner to have designated charging areas, either in the garage or in the parking lot. We don't have direct incentives for that, other than if they do that, then we have an incentive for charging off-peak for charging. But one of the things we're under Proposition 26, which says that in our electric fund, we cannot subsidize you can't take money from one group of customers, say non-participants, people with gasoline cars, and give it to another set of customers. There are mechanisms for doing that. We have what's called low LCFS. It's a program by the state that takes money from gasoline, like oil companies, and then gives it to low energy or low emission fuels such as electricity. So we've been using that for infrastructure upgrades to bring our system to the chargers, but there's no direct incentives for apartment owners at this point, other than encouraging operators. So the curbside would help the apartment owners because then they'd be able to park and then charge. So the LCFS funds, we've been using it for infrastructure, not for the direct subsidies. But getting back to the subsidization, public benefits charge is only for energy efficiency. You can't use it for load building. So when you pay someone to use electricity, it would be paying someone to increase usage instead of decrease usage. So that one's not available, but the LCFS is. And but to answer your question, we don't have an incentive for the apartment owners.
And would the curbside charging be level 2, level 3?
It'd be level 2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With regards to the public charging stations, the level 2 and level 3, the city-owned and the public and private-owned, you indicated there was about 50-to-1 ratio of cars versus charging stations. Of these charging stations, how often are they being used? Do we have kind of metrics saying, 5 hours a day they're being used or something, so that's the first question. And second question is, what's the right number? How many should be having cars to charges so that we have a good balance there? That's the question.
I can answer the second one easier than the first one. So I think industry nationwide, I think it's like 20. So I said 10 to 20 we would be in line with other communities. So we have a little bit of work there, and we're trying to encourage private operators to come in and do business. We do things really well. We do electricity really well, and we do water really well. When you get into retail charging stations, you have a lot of things that a private operator may be better suited to, like damage to it, vandalism, things like that. They kind of price it into their business model. They can set their rates a lot easier to have a good balance and make a business out of it. Whereas us, to set rates, we have a lot of public input and we have to have proceedings. So we think it's a good model for us to bring the power to the charger and then have a meter, and then they do it. We have a little bit of that data. I don't have it with me, but I could provide the commission, because the charges that we do have, we have an operator, it's called Green Lots, that operates it, and we can give you that data for our chargers, the 78 that we have. Unless, I don't know, do you have off the top of your head? I'm asking our assistant director. If not, we could bring back the data. But as far as how often, what's the utilization of our chargers?
That's good afternoon, Scott Mellon, Assistant General Manager, Power Management. So that number you used, it's like 38 to 50 is a ratio of combined both private and publicly available. Even the private ones have to be publicly available in order for us to count them. We don't have any insight into usage on those. The ones that we manage, theoretically, we can get some information. I was just talking with Brian, who kind of manages the project. He doesn't have the number right off the top of his head, but he could eventually get it. If you're looking for it, we could probably find it.
Yeah, my objective is to see how useful is it? How is it being utilized? Is there a line out the door to fill, or is nobody cares about them? To see where we can allocate our resources. Maybe it's better to kind of partner up with the industry outside and let them deal with it, like the general manager indicated, as opposed to us doing it. If we're, I don't know if people are coming in front of the city hall to charge their cars. Maybe not. I don't know. I know we have a couple of chargers in the parking lot here.
I would assume they are because, so the numbers that we're talking about, that ratio, that perfect number, that actually came out of a study that was put out in 2019, and that was 10 cars per charger nationwide was the magic number that they came up with. I don't know how relevant that magic number is today, but I know that the industry has recognized that 10, and pretty much all cities, states are all looking to aim for that level of ratio, that level of penetration. So I know for our part, California, I think, is up at about 27 on the average over the whole state as of right now. And I think we're headed in the direction of 30-ish, but we're trying to bring it down. The part that couldn't be planned for in 2019 was the level of acceptance of electric vehicles that kind of taken its toll on the state, right? And we know that from our infrastructure. So the adoption of electric vehicles is happening much faster. I know that CEC had plans in the order of 5 million cars by 2035. And that would put our share by that time at about 48,000 in Glendale. We're moving very quickly towards those numbers. So I'd have to, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head what that new number is, but.
We'll bring back the usage information from our chargers to the next meeting. We'll do a written report.
Yeah, I think that'd be great to report back, and I would add one comment, as you do look at that report. I think one policy decision that we could help influence is the distribution or split between level 2 and level 3 chargers. I think that's another thing that maybe has changed in the last 5 years, whereas there were lots of level 2 chargers in grocery stores. They were really novel 5 years ago. My experience driving an electric vehicle is that I never use a public level 2 charger because I can charge at home, and I use a level 3 charger when I'm on a road trip, and that's it. Now, my usage may not be emblematic of everybody in Glendale, but I think there are fewer use cases for public level 2 charging than maybe we thought 5 years ago. And we might want to say, well, we should lean harder on having fewer level 3 chargers, and the usage data may bear that out. So maybe you can look at it with that lens.
Thank you.
Comments for the general manager?
Yeah, I just had a question. We have incentives for home chargers for homes, but we don't have them for apartments?
They would apply to apartments. We have incentive for off-peak charging. So
But
when
I
they
think
have
you
electric
can, you
vehicles
can
and they
get
charge
like a
off.
three.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When they charge off-peak, then they get an incentive. So if an apartment owner had that, then they would get the same incentive. But we don't have a pot of money to install chargers at apartments. So the capital cost is what we don't have.
Right, but I thought that we had a program where it was, I believe, $300 for people to install chargers at their home. Is that
I think it's
Razan?
$600.
600?
Yeah.
What is the subsidy for home charger installation? That would apply to apartment owners as well.
But maybe the gap is the kind of infrastructure to get the power to the space in the parking garage, those kinds of things, not the charging unit itself. Is that maybe the issue, that why there are fewer options for apartment dwellers?
Well, for one thing, they don't own the facility. And another thing, to get power to where you park, it sometimes takes, it's more expensive than a home where you have a garage and you just run a circuit and you get the power. So, I should stand corrected that the same incentive that we give residential single-family residents is available. It's just not used as often because of the high cost to get it to the parking lot or to the parking garage.
Second question I had, on the recycled water, what are the major users of what are the major users that are using potable water now for exterior, like landscaping and stuff? Do you know?
Well, most landscaping in Glendale is potable water because we don't have a parallel distribution system. But I believe the recycled water that we have in use are for parks and places like that. And the expansion, one of the expansions that we're looking at is near Glendale College, the park across from Glendale College.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the distribution system that is very costly for what you would get out of it, because you would have to run it from the source all the way, or tap into where it exists. So when you factor that in, it doesn't pencil. But we have a master plan to look at this, and hopefully our high user areas, you get the cost per use down. So we're hopeful that we can find some locations where the usage is great enough that the cost will be about the same as potable water. And that would increase supply line. Because with our drought, cyclical drought, this is a constant supply line because the sewer water gets cleaned up and then we use it again for irrigation.
Thank you.
One more comment I had, you mentioned the distribution outages during the summer.
Yes.
Those are technically distinct from kind of rolling blackout where there's insufficient power in the system, right?
That's correct.
So is there a way that we can help customers understand if their power goes out because of a transformer that was overloaded in their local neighborhood, or the city doesn't have enough power? Do people care? I mean, their power's out, right?
We were very
But-
careful not to call them rolling blackouts, yes. Because they were forced outages based on equipment failure. And rolling blackouts is where you don't have enough power to serve the city, so you have to designate for an hour each, rolling. Okay, you're off for an hour, okay, now you're back on, you're off for an hour. And that's, fortunately, we didn't have to do that, and we don't want to do that. That's our goal, not to do. So these were equipment failure outages. In our communication, we've referred to them as distribution outages.
Great, thank you.
Item number 4, oral communication. Discussion is to limit not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer to the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report. We actually do have a speaker.
I understand Ms. Gish would like to speak on item 5B, right? Are there any speakers present for items not on the agenda? Or anyone on the phone?
No, there are.
Okay, then we'll move on and we'll take your comment when we get to that point in the agenda, Ms. Gish. Well, that would be incorrect. There is a public meeting going on. I know we had some technical difficulties with the phone system earlier. I don't know if that's been resolved. Maybe we can check on that. Okay, well, thank you for letting us know. We'll check on that. If you can let your friend know that we're working on it, and maybe check back or stay tuned in for an update. Thank you.
Item number 5, reports. Item number 5A, power resource serving summer peak.
Yes, we have a couple of slides on this. Would you please put them up? We thought it might be useful to show how we served our summer peak. We did have an all-time peak of 349 megawatts. And as I said, we served it all with imports. You know, noting that we did employ our demand response, we got 2.6 megawatts of demand response from our air conditioning program and the OPAL program. And we did have that distribution outage. So without those two things, our load would have been higher, but we did use those, and the load was 349 megawatts. And this graph shows how we served it, where it says 2024 peak. That occurred on September 6th. And we used Glendale Water and Power Resources that we own throughout the West. So the gas portion is our 2 natural gas plants. Well, we have our Magnolia plant in Burbank, and we have our local plant, Grayson 9 at the Grayson. So I take it back. We did have our Grayson plant on. It was derated because of it was a hot day, and I think there was a problem with the air conditioning. They have to air condition the air in the inlet so that it can get full output. So we didn't have full output on that. Mr. Mellon is going to give a detailed report. I'm giving an overview. We still have our coal plant in Utah that brought in 35 megawatts. And this power is brought in hundreds of miles over a high voltage direct current line that came in through Sylmar and then ultimately into Glendale. That plant is going to be natural gas. It's initially going to change to natural gas, and we have a study to determine how much of it can be done by hydrogen. But And I think in 2026, it's going to be natural gas. So we are going to have a reduction in greenhouse gas by that conversion. And we also purchased some energy, so we purchased 151 megawatts. When we purchase energy from the market, it's devoid of green attributes. So even if it did come from a solar plant or wind plant, those attributes were attributed to whoever paid for those attributes. So we call it generic purchases. So 151 of generic purchases. Because it's generic purchase, the most common generation on the margin is natural gas. We assume it's a natural gas. So we bundled those into what we call carbon-based resources. About 268 megawatts is carbon-based. And then we have carbon-free, which would be nuclear energy. We have part of the Palo Verde power plant in Arizona, and we also have a part of the Hoover Dam Boulder Canyon project. Both of those do not produce carbon emissions. And there was 23 megawatts of that. And then we have our solar facilities, solar and geothermal and wind facilities that amounted to 65 megawatts. I'd just like to note that we didn't get, we have contracted for more, but on the day in our peak hour, it is different than what the contract is because of whatever reasons Mr. Mellon will get into. But aside from this, we put our average for 2023. You can see on our peak hour, it looks much different than on average over the year because you know, things like wind not blowing when you need it blowing, etc. And facilities not producing what we've contracted for, they've produced less. So as comparison, we had on our peak hour, we had 75% from carbon-based, but on an average over the year's time, it's about 45%. So it's much less on average, but we still need to serve our peak, so we keep people in power. We need resources that are dispatchable that we have control over. The carbon-free, because hydroelectric is dependent on the water out of the Lake Mead, that varies. And so as far as the percentage-wise, it's a higher percentage on an annual basis compared to the peak day, about 20% versus 6%. And likewise, over a year's time, you'll get more sun, you get more wind, you get more geothermal, so about 35% on average versus 18% on average. So with that, I'll let our AGM in charge of power talk a little bit more about the resources themselves.
Good afternoon, President Fay, members of the commission. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide, please. So Mr. Robledo covered actually quite a bit of the details, but essentially what this chart shows is, you know, what our common day looked like in the peak, right? Where the energy was flowing, the type of energy it was, and, you know, how much of it. If we look at, and kind of like how we plan through the day ahead is a representation of what we're thinking at, you know, a couple months out all the way up to the day before. And we were very lucky that we convinced LA to give us 40 megawatts worth of on-peak energy. That actually helped us quite a bit. So we had that energy being delivered to us during this peak. That was in system. So we didn't have to supply any transmission from where it came from, likely Haynes or Scattergood. Town site is a solar facility. We have 50 megawatts out of that site. As you can see, we got 40 megawatts at this hour. Obviously, the sun's going down, and that most of our solar is further east of us. So when our load is going up, that solar's going down.
Scott, sorry to interrupt. Can you just tell the commission, the public, where these are located? Like what part of this, just for flavor?
Sure. So I'll say, I think town site's actually Pacific, or not, Southwest. So it'd be tying into our AC that's being provided Like I said, LADWP is coming from the basin. BPA is coming from the Pacific DC, so up in the Pacific Northwest. Same with PowerX, same for MSCG. We're trying to take as much advantage as we can of the DC line at this time and moving energy down without exposing us to risk on the reserves. Our geothermal, Star Peak and Whitegrass, they are significantly underperforming. We're actually in discussions with that contractor at the moment. I think Star Peak was supposed to be 12 to 15, and Whitegrass is supposed to be closer to 5. And as you can see, we got 4 and 2. And those are coming off our AC also. Titan is coming from the Pacific DC down also. That's small hydro. That actually counts for renewable resource because it's small. Large hydro just isn't held against us. It's basically the way it breaks out in the numbers. So all of that is kind of planned well in advance. So we kind of covers a chunk of our base load when we're looking at what we're expecting. That's about 165 megawatts. From the Glendale resources, got natural gas from Magnolia, which is through Western, our neighbor Burbank. We do have some coal coming from IPP. Just to clarify some of the information that Mr. Robledo spoke about, yes, we are looking at the transition to natural gas at that site. Besides the transition to natural gas, though, is a reduction in total output from the new units. We're going down to about 840. So even though our share increases, which gives us more access to transmission on the DC line, the Southern Transmission System, we also get less energy from that site. And then on top of that, we'll be looking at the hydrogen betterments that are going on at that facility. They're being built right now. And actually, I'm going to be going up there to review some of the installations there within the next week. The solar at Eland, it's almost in-system delivery from LA. We're using some of their transmission because it's one of their projects, but it's basically out towards, I want to say, it's off the 14. It's like way out. Just went blank there. Large hydro, Hoover, obviously we already talked about that. Nuclear, Palo Verde, that's the Arizona area. And then Unit 9 Grayson, that's our own backyard. We did have a D-rate on that unit. That's normally able to put out around 45 to 47 megawatts. We did have a problem with our chiller that occurred an hour or two before we hit our peak. So that was not the kind of surprise we'd like to have. Luckily, it went down for about an hour and came back up. We were able to get it back started pretty quickly, and we were able to get about 37 to 39 megawatts out of it during that period. In real time, so we have all those, the day ahead, long term, we have flexibility that we can deal with the energy resources that are associated with Glendale, even through LA and Burbank. And in real time, we have to manage that fluctuation, the variation between our load and our generation. And to do that, we used large purchases from TransAlta, and our Balancing Authority Area Service Agreement that we have with LA has some flexibility of plus or minus 20 megawatts that we pay for ahead of time, and we use as we can. That just allows us to go some negative or some positive on our interchange when our real goal on our interchange is 0. That's what we're trying to get to, but basically we're buying energy through this, kind of like a virtual call option. So as you can see, we hit 349. What we actually had was probably closer to 353. We had a couple of sustained outages. We had the transformer outage at Tropico that actually was close to around 3 megawatts. So at that, we probably would have had over 350. You can do the next slide, please. Thank you. Well, a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is just kind of a picture of our day. As you can see, at the peak on that Friday, the 6th, was temperature-wise about 112 degrees, and we had a forecast. Our actual was 349. Our forecast 354 was probably accurate. we actually, because we had that outage, we didn't hit it, but sometimes our forecast can be very accurate. But you can see that there is a fair amount of turmoil in the forecast versus what was actually going on those days leading up to our peak. but that's what you guys pay us for. So we manage that variation. And I'm available for any questions.
Fellow commissioners, any questions for Mr. Mellon?
I had a question with regards to the prior slide, not this one, the one right before it. This one, the purchases that we make, it would be beneficial for the public to be aware as to how much are we paying for different kinds of purchases.
Yeah.
Just educational purpose, it is what it is, and we're gonna have to get it until we get Grayson up and running, I guess. But I don't know how much we're paying for LADWP compared to, let's say, Elon. Maybe that's per megawatt or whatever.
Sure. I can tell you right off the top of my head, the LA deal was, we paid a premium for that. It was almost like a call option, only that they delivered the energy and we were going to use it. But we paid them a little up front to make sure that they put that energy aside, and then we paid them again when the energy was delivered at market value. So that cost a bit. The Eland, it's pretty. That's actually a pretty decent dollar amount for that solar. Because we got in the deal with LA, we did okay, and this was early on when we did it. We're not paying too much for that. But yes, I agree. The only thing that I would say about this particular time when this event occurred is we are probably paying far more for anything we're buying on the spot market or in real time, just because everyone needs this energy at that time. And we're very vulnerable to what the market prices are because they're, I once had an old boss tell me that, you know what the price of a blackout is? And I said, no. And he said, it's infinite, because you can never repair the damage you do to the customer's confidence in you. So when we are out there and we need energy, if it's a couple hours, $1,000, $2,000, it's not unheard of for us to pay that. So I have no problem looking and providing that type of information, but to be honest, it might be skewed for these hours.
Yeah, I would be curious to know what was not necessarily just the peak, but kind of on all those successive peaks, it was hot for like a week.
Yeah.
What was the highest price we paid, right? And then maybe we could kind of establish some equivalence, like what would that mean for an individual customer, right? How much more were we paying to buy the energy than our customers were paying us for that energy, right? And
okay.
I think that would be kind of interesting. And then in theory, if we had some way, tying it into the DER conversation coming up, if we had some way to pass that value to pull energy out of our customers' electric vehicles or their stationary storage at home, presumably we would rather pay our own customers than, some evil market trader, right? So, it might help us establish some benchmarks for what that energy is really worth when it all hits the fan.
Sure. I think you and I have talked about this once before, and there probably is some value in showing you this. I would say that that the peak instance when you're willing to pay that extra dollar for that extra energy or pay somebody to turn their air conditioner off requires an understanding on our part of who has it and who I can shut off, right? To be blunt, we have the ability to shut power off right now, but it's called an outage. We would prefer not to do that, right? So if we have real-time information about the supply of that energy from a group of customers, because we're not talking about kilowatt hours, we're talking about megawatt hours that we would need to shed, then that would help us. But right now we don't have that insight in real-time response.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Can you go back to the last slide, please? Actually, go forward for a second. So the solar is 53 is what we got. Can you go to the, how much do we have under contract?
For town side, it's a 50 megawatt, and we got 40.
And what about the other one? Elon?
Elon is 25, but I think we weren't getting full output of that because they were restricted in their startup, they were delayed in their startup, and they're doing circuit-to-circuit testing, so we only had a couple of circuits that were live to be able to provide energy to us.
So for the 50, we got 40.
Yeah. And for the 25 that we should have had, we only got the 13, but that's probably because there's only a couple circuits that were available anyways.
So you could sign up, as you said, DER, but if, let's say you sign up for a Tesla battery, but we don't own the customer. They may have taken the Tesla to work and it's not there. So solar's great, wind is great, but to serve, go back to that one. You need dispatchable energy to fill in, and we have to plan for it. And, but having said that, we'll get to the numbers because I think it does illustrate the way we would do it. We'd take the total budget divided by the megawatt hour output. Because a lot of times we talk in capacity, but really what matters when you pay your bill, you do cents per kilowatt hour. So what matters is the cents per kilowatt hour. So we'll provide that data. We'll get that back to the commission.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is I think during the same heat wave, there were some Tesla customers in PG&E territory who were part of a virtual power plant who were getting paid $20, $30 to allow the virtual power plant to take power, either not charge their cars or take power out of their power walls. And just, you get a text message that says, would you like $30 if you let us take, X energy from your battery? Yes or no, right? Mm-hmm. So that technology exists. Other places are doing it. I believe there's no technical reason why we couldn't do it. And I think, as you said, we're getting more and more customers with progressive electric vehicle technology. So I think it's something we ought to think of, even if it's just marginal. It'd be good to start developing those muscles because that's something I think we'll be seeing more of.
Okay.
Question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5B, plan increase solar.
I'm sorry, before we jump into 5B, did we get a resolution on the phone calls? It sounded like there were some people interested in speaking on recycled water, which is not on the agenda, so maybe we can go back and take their calls?
Yes, we have one caller, but it's for item 5B.
It is for 5B. Okay, then we'll handle that on the next item.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 5B reports, plan increase solar adoption and develop additional distribution energy resources.
So we commissioned E3 to do a study of our system.
Sorry, President Fay, commission members, I believe Commissioner Larry will be recusing himself from this item. If he could please state the reason for the recusal.
I'll not be able to participate in this. The company that I own has business dealings with Willdan, who owns E3, so I need to recuse myself from this.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
thank you for your service in the first part of the meeting and wish you a pleasant afternoon.
Okay, if we still?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
And if there's anyone that had trouble calling in earlier, we resolved the issue, so please, the phone lines are open.
So we commissioned E3 to do a study of our system to determine how much solar energy we could cultivate within Glendale through all sources, through rooftops or solar canopies. And we now have this presentation from them. So Mr. Mellon is our Assistant General Manager of Power. He'll introduce it, then we'll have a speaker from E3 to present the report, then we'll have our Clean Energy Officer give our recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Robledo. Good afternoon, President Fay, members of the commission. I thought it was appropriate that I give sort of an intro to this discussion on the study and what our plans are going to be. The key here is this, the question that was asked was a relatively complex question. On the surface, it did not seem to be complex, which I don't think the council had framed it to be a complex question. but it really is. There's a fair amount of information that goes behind analyzing this type of scenario and then determining how many different scenarios actually need to be able to be determined to paint the appropriate picture for how this information can be laid out. The reason why I'm saying all this is there is a fair amount of information to digest. And this is the stripped down version. What we're providing in the first half is basically an executive summary that E3 will be providing. The total study is close to 300 slides. We felt it was necessary to take it in small bites. We also felt it was probably appropriate for you to consume this and digest it over a period of time. So we're going to give you the outcome of the study. We're going to go through how we think we can help solve the particular scenario the council had in mind, meet their intent. And then we're going to let the commission kind of mull it over. And if you have questions tonight or any time in the next month, please feel free to engage with us and we will discuss everything that we have. We will be releasing in draft form the full study probably in the next week. And then we'll be coming back next month to the commission. We'll be looking for a motion to basically looking for your support in the findings of this study and looking for your support in how we plan to address meeting the intent of what council has requested from us. So without further ado, Clean Energy Officer, Ms. Soloyan, and Mr. Cutter, who's going to kick us off from E3. They'll take it from here. Thank you.
I think you start. I'm just trying to press this button. I'm not sure quite where to point it. There it goes. Okay. Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Eric Cutter. I'm a partner with Energy and Environmental Economics, also known as E3. And as mentioned, we were hired by GWP to evaluate the feasibility, the cost and benefits of achieving the goals set out by the City Council. This page is a table of contents that you can use to navigate later when you have time. I'm going to jump straight ahead and jump into the presentation. I think I'll get to a lot of the questions you might have by the end of the presentations, but definitely feel free to interrupt me if you have clarifying questions. So to start, as mentioned, we were hired to evaluate two things. The City Council set forth a goal of achieving 10% customer adoption of distributed solar and storage by 2027. And then B, as part of that program, could the city and the utility achieve a dispatchable peak load reduction with distributed resources of 100 megawatts? So our study undertook what was the feasibility of achieving those goals and what are the costs and benefits of achieving those goals, and that's what I'll be presenting this evening.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
just because we do have public comments on this topic, would you think about what's a reasonable kind of introduction, and then we can allow members of the public to share their opinion as well? I want to make sure we don't go too deep into the weeds here before giving a chance for the public to comment too. So,
I hope I have about 20 slides, and that should be short enough. But if I have found at the community meetings what I thought was pretty digestible is complicated because we live and breathe this stuff. So feel free to interrupt me if it's time for questions or clarification.
Let's just for folks who are interested in following along at home, we'll say 10 or 15 minutes for the speaker, and then we'll take your comments.
Great. Okay, and right, so the mic's on. So the City Council goals enumerated one of these three bubbles up here, achieving customer adoption of distributed solar. And it's important to recognize that both the city and the utility have two competing or balancing goals to consider. One is to make sure that other customers, the grid and the community as a whole, is realizing benefits, not just the customers themselves who are installing solar and storage. And two is to make sure the rate impact of these programs is reasonable and not essentially increasing rates to the degree where you're having an energy affordability challenge primarily for your low to moderate income customers. So we'll be presenting
the impacts of these programs, largely with these three goals in mind. There we go. Now, in addition to these goals, the city has set forth some pretty ambitious challenges, like many other cities in the state of California, for clean energy and carbon-free energy production. Glendale has some additional challenges, is in that your territory is fairly well built out. You're in the LA basin, which has some transmission constraints. And you've seen the integrated resource plans from GWP that are really trying to address the challenge of how they can deliver clean energy reliably and affordably to the city. This particular study really digs into the opportunity for local resources. What is the potential for local resources in the city of Glendale to be promoted and adopted, and how can those resources help reduce your reliance on fossil generation and imported generation that has to go over those transmission lines? Oops, wrong button. So where are we so far on solar adoption in the city of Glendale? This is a historical chart, and you can see in the yellow line is the upfront incentive for solar that declined and was eventually discontinued. But nevertheless, solar adoption in Glendale continues to increase to the point of having an annual adoption of 438 customers in the most recent year adopting solar. I did want to put this in perspective. The 10% goal set forth by the council for 2027 would mean increasing this rate by more than 400% to having over 2,000 customers adopt solar in each year over the next 3 years. So that's a pretty ambitious jump. More on the status of where Glendale is at today. Glendale has 3.4% customer adoption, and that's pretty on par with a lot of neighboring cities. You can see right there, Pasadena, Burbank, Anaheim. There are a few areas that are above 10%. We want to note that 3 of those are achieving those goals primarily because they have a high amount of new construction. So they have open land where new houses are being built. As of 2024, the California Building Code requires new homes to be built with solar installed. And then the other area you'll see that has achieved 10% is PG&E, but that is because their rates are more than twice that of Glendale's. So that's not exactly the reason you want to be achieving 10% solar adoption. So summary here, currently Glendale's right there in the mix of a lot of other cities in Southern California and California-wide of solar adoption. Same for energy storage, though notable here, energy storage simply is more expensive and doesn't have the payback for customers. So almost universally, it's well below 1% adoption in cities in California. So that is going to make meeting that goal of achieving distributed storage very difficult or not feasible to try and meet that 10% goal of including storage at all those customer sites. So I think you'll all be familiar with the net energy metering and the discussions that have been going on in the state about reforming net energy metering. And so we've got a lot of feedback on this at the community meetings and really wanted to lay out clearly what that cost shift with net energy metering is. And it relates to compensating for solar generation at the full retail rate of the utility. Is that solar generation is saving some of the utility costs, but not all of the utility costs. So that leaves a revenue gap that the utility has to make up from other customers through a rate increase in order to continue providing reliable electric service to all their customers. California went to NEM 3.0, which is also called the net billing tariff, and primarily to try and address this cost shift issue that was just growing and becoming a large problem for rates in California. So the net billing tariff shifts the compensation for solar that is exported to the grid to be more closely to the actual costs the utilities are avoiding. It reduces the cost shift, but it doesn't eliminate it, so it makes it smaller. And we'll see the programs designs we're presenting later evaluate the different options of NEM 1.0 or NEM 3.0, which is also called the net billing tariff. This is how California has been faring since the change to that net billing tariff for NEM 3.0. That happened in April of 2023. There were a lot of dire predictions about it killing the solar industry. It certainly presented a challenge, but you can see on the top, PV installations continue to climb, and in fact, it provided a higher incentive for those customers to include storage. So we've seen storage adoption increase with the change to net billing tariff. It doesn't solve the cost shift problem. That's shown here on the left. The cost shift, even with that change, is forecasted to more than double from $3.4 billion for the 3 California IOUs, investor-owned utilities, in 2021 to more than double that in 2024, over $8.5 billion. That cost shift equates to a rate increase for those 3 utilities from about 8 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's not small. It's not 2 or 3 cents. It's a good portion of those utility bills are due to the NEM cost shift. And this is exactly why it's a good time for Glendale to be considering how to get out in front of this challenge and keep that cost shift manageable for the city and for all your customers. So that 10% goal is in terms of customer adoption. It's very typical in these kinds of studies to look at 3 types of adoption levels, and we looked at the first 2. The first is technical potential, and that's a pretty detailed look at buildings, the trees, the orientation of the roofs, about how much solar could be adopted physically in the city. Then from looking at those buildings and homes, there's another cut of customers that are going to find it economic to install solar. So that's the economic potential for solar adoption in the city. And those are the 2 metrics I'll be presenting as part of our study. What we did not do is look specifically at the next challenge of there's a lot of real world barriers to adoption, be it customer risk aversion or customer access to financing or customer lack of information. That reduces that potential to what's called an achievable potential even further. And we'll compare those a little more in upcoming slides. So looking at the technical potential, here in the columns we've got 2 tables. The top is looking at different types of buildings, single family, multifamily, and commercial and industrial. The bottom table is essentially owners and renters. First 2 columns are the number of units in total, and that technical potential found about 75% of those buildings could physically install solar of a reasonable size on their roof that's not shaded by a tree, that's pointed in the right direction, that kind of thing. The technical potential is highest on the roof for PV for commercial and industrial. They have the larger roofs. The situation reverses for storage. There's currently a limitation on the size of storage a building can install based on its historical usage. So given that the commercial potential for storage is reduced and most of the technical potential for storage adoption is in single family homes, and that's the 2 highlighted yellow items. This is a little bit easier to see here in a graphical form. In a pie chart, you can see about evenly split the technical potential for solar across those 3 sectors, single family, multifamily, and commercial and industrial, whereas most of the storage potential under current rules would be in the single family homes. You were talking earlier about different sources of solar. So when we talk about the costs and benefits, it's also really important to recognize that there's a lot of interest in customer-owned distributed solar. It is also the most expensive type of solar because those systems are smaller. So when the city of Glendale is looking at what facilities can provide the benefits of solar most cost effectively, One of those options is going to be community solar and storage. So that can be building on large parking lots or in larger municipal buildings in Glendale. That comes out at a cost for a storage and solar system of about $2,900 a kilowatt, as compared to more than 60% higher to have the same number of megawatts installed on customer-owned roofs at the whether that's commercial, industrial, or single-family homes. So another way of saying this is, if the ultimate goal for the city is to realize a certain amount of solar generation that can be more cost-effectively achieved for a given amount of kilowatt hours or kilowatts by including customer solar projects and not just having the goal set on behind-the-meter customer-owned solar and storage systems. So we have a lot of elements of programs to consider. We worked with, well, after hearing feedback from the community, and worked with Glendale Water and Power to roll this all up into 4 scenarios to present tonight. And these scenarios are different balances of achieving that adoption, achieving that equity across different customer groups, and different levels of the rate impact. So across these 4 scenarios, they're going to differ primarily on the level and type of incentives that are offered, whether we continue net energy metering or shift to the net billing tariff. And then also, some of the programs have specific elements to try and address increasing access or increasing adoption for low to moderate income or renters or disadvantaged communities that have some higher barriers to installing solar, whether it's access to financing or having a split incentive between a tenant and the owner of the building. This next slide goes into a little more detail. I'll try and keep this high level, but definitely open to questions if people want to dig further. Scenario 1 is looking at continuing the net energy metering as is going forward. Scenario 4 is our most aggressive or ambitious scenario. Like, if we pulled out all the stops, how much adoption can we get in Glendale? So that continues net energy metering and has some upfront incentives, mostly targeted at those harder to reach groups of renters and multifamily, but a broad base of incentives to try and increase adoption in the city. Scenario 2 and scenario 3 reduce the net energy metering to a net billing tariff. So we're reducing that compensation for solar exports, so that reduces the payback to the customer a little bit. And then scenario 2, we're focusing all of our efforts on incentives for low to moderate income renters, including some direct install programs, versus scenario 3 is a little bit more balanced. We're have incentives to a broader portion of renters and low to moderate income. And so we're calling that the balanced scenario. And you'll see the differences in costs and adoption in the next few slides. We want to present results for these scenarios. If you remember those 3 balancing goals for the city and the utility. So one is what they achieve in terms of adoption citywide. What are the impact on rates and bills? How is that adoption spread across different groups? Primarily, how much continues to be in single-family homes versus how are we doing in increasing access to the renters in the low to moderate income communities? So that's what I'll be presenting in the next few slides. So this is looking at, across those different programs, the incentive levels. In terms of, on the left, the dollar per kilowatt hour. And you can see, again, scenario 1 and scenario 4 continue the net energy metering rates compensation. So those have the highest per kilowatt hour payment for solar generation, whereas scenario 2 and scenario 3 have somewhat lower. They're going to a net billing tariff for the exports. Scenario 1 doesn't have any upfront incentives for solar and storage. Scenario 2 has incentives, but very focused on low to moderate income multifamily customer segment. Scenario 3 spreads those out a little bit, and they're slightly lower per unit. But you're still, we're targeting a payback for those various customers of 7 years, and that is the number of years it takes for the savings to add up to the cost of the installation. So that's a simple payback for customers. It's a common metric. Scenario 4, as we said, is if we're doing essentially spending the most money to try and get the most adoption, and that reduces that payback period from 7 years to 5 years, and those incentives are more broadly available to all customers. So what do those programs achieve in terms of adoption? On the left, we're looking at adoption by 2027. So that was the year the city set the goal. And we can see scenario 1, continuing net energy metering, actually gets, in our economic model of economic potential, gets close to 10% adoption by 2027. The purple is in the storage. You can see the storage adoption is quite a bit lower. We saw that in the earlier charts. Scenario 4 is our most ambitious, and that's, we can get us up to 15, almost 16% adoption by 2027. Comes at the most cost. Again, I want to emphasize this is our economic adoption that we modeled. Scenario 2 and scenario 3 are there in the middle of around 11% adoption. The key difference in these 3 scenarios, 2, 3, and 4, is more over on the right-hand side. The NEM net energy metering, most of the adoption, 90%, is happening in single-family homes, and only 10% of the total adoption of the program in the city, only 10% is occurring within multifamily or renter communities, and or 16% in low to moderate income. These other programs, 2, 3, and 4, are doing a better job of giving access to those communities to solar and to storage as well. And you see it generally increases from 2 to 3 to 4. You're getting the highest rate of adoption in the scenario 4. So slide 20, I've got 4 slides left. In case anyone wants to stop now, or let me keep going.
Yeah, let's stop here.
Okay.
And if we can give a chance for the members of the public to comment. Ms. Gish, since you came in person, you get to go first. Come on down. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay. We'll take the callers on the phone.
Yes, we have 3, 2 for item number 5B and 1 for item 5A.
Okay, let's take the 2 for 5B one at a time.
Okay.
And you'll have 3 minutes each.
Caller Jack Waller, you are on air. You have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, evening, Commission. My name is Jack Walworth. Been following this plan for several years. It seems like it's been taking a bit of time. My big question here at this point is, in reading through the presentation, where's the plan? There's supposed to be a plan that we can review and discuss before it goes to council. So that's really my big issue. I mean, I did have a comment about the city of Moreno and how they are so sky high compared to us, about 3 times what we have in terms of rooftop penetration. But I understand that it's a different city with a different kind of growth. and that new building probably is what jacked that up. But my question there is, why don't we reach out to the city of Moreno and see what kinds of programs they've got going and see how we might be able to learn from them? Those are my main points. It is a complicated issue. We were hoping that we could have gotten started on this much earlier, and it seems like we still don't have a plan to guide us to the next level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next caller.
We have Monica Campana. Monica, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you to the consultants with E3 and GWP staff. I have a lot of different thoughts about 3 items that were on the agenda today, so I don't know if I should go backwards in time. But regarding the item that's up right now, I also echo there was one job to do, and that was to come up with a plan of action and how we were going to meet this goal. And the time was flexible in the consultant's job request. It said 2027 or whatever date is considered that you think is feasible. So I hope that will be really integrated into what you're offering up to City Council. My question is, will you be presenting a plan, this presentation, with a written report that really is, going to go into the details of each of these slides beyond what you're able to talk about today? Because we need to sit with this and review what you're saying. And if that's possible, we much appreciate it. I think the big key issue is right now we have a hole to fill. We have to fill it. We're not going to be putting any more gas in Glendale beyond what we're already installing. So we need to do this anyway. So how can you please help us get there? We need to look at dispatchable capacity. We know that we need storage with all of the solar. I love that the city is looking really aggressively now, it looks like, with the PP purchase and power agreement. I hope that includes storage for these commercial and large industrial sites. I hope that you will take another look at a virtual power plant model, one that maybe better reflects what our customers here would want. You need dispatchable power, and if you had enough customers with solar and storage, then you'd have it, and you wouldn't have to pay outside of Glendale for power during these peak moments. I mean, that's what this is all about. I would love to know what that number is, too. As one of the President Commissioner asked, I would love to know that, because then we know what we're shooting for. Okay, we needed to buy, 30 megawatts. If we were able to come up with that here, how much would that have cost outside? And then could we invest those funds here for a program locally so we don't have to do that again in 5 years? We'll have a program built up. That is some of my comments. I have comments on the recycled water. I would also like to know how the peak load EV program is doing. I've been a participant for a few years since it started, and I love it. I'm hoping that's been adopted widely, and I'm curious how it's going. And I will reserve the rest of my comments till after I hear the rest of the presentation and look forward to some follow-up reports. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, why don't you continue and finish your remaining slides, and then we'll have Ms. Gish share her comments.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. The remaining slides present the cost-benefit results, or the cost test results. These are 5 cost tests that were first established in California actually about 20 years ago. They're now used around the nation to evaluate benefits of distributed energy resources like energy efficiency and distributed solar. So these are like industry standard tests. We'll present a few of them. The first 2, the societal cost test, looks at the benefits, costs and benefits to essentially society as a whole. It adds some additional societal benefits like a societal cost of carbon. The total resource cost test focuses more on the actual monetary benefits to the city of Glendale itself. And then the next three tests are perspective tests. The participant is it economic to the person installing solar? How good of a deal is it for them? What's their economic payback, like we were talking about earlier? The utility cost test is, do the benefits exceed the costs in terms of what the utilities outlays or what the utility is spending? The third is the ratepayer impact measure, which considers the utility cost, but also the impacts on revenues from reduced bills. So that's the ratepayer impact measure. These are the cost-benefit results for the 4 program scenarios we evaluated. These are presented as ratios, so above 1.0 means there's more benefits than costs. You can see to the participant, we're still seeing pretty good benefits. So I don't know exactly, scenario 1, scenario 3 have a benefit to cost ratio of 3. I think that's, depending on the customer, will be in the paybacks in the period of 7 to 9 years, but it will differ by particular customer segments. Remember, we reduced from the net energy metering to the net billing tariff in scenario 2 and 3, so that reduces those ratios from 3 to about 2. That's still fairly economic, so there's still a pretty good incentive for customers to get a payback on their bill for installing solar. And that's why you've seen solar adoption continue to grow with the change to net billing tariff in California. The benefits on the societal basis, so this is looking particularly to the cost and benefits to the Glendale Water and Powers utility, but with some of those additional societal benefits. I found what was interesting here is you have a positive test for continuing NEM, but these programs that are trying to have various elements to increase accessibility to other groups actually increase the cost-benefit ratio from just under 2 to just over 2. And that tells me, any of these scenarios where you're getting a little more targeted or more creative are an improvement over NEM alone. This ratepayer impact measure is an alternative way of looking at that cost shift I was showing you earlier. So remember, below 1 is negative. The largest or the worst rating here that is the cost exceeding the benefits are for scenario 1 and 4 under net energy metering, about 0.3, and a reduced cost shift, but still a cost shift for scenarios 2 and 3 to around 0.4. Let me leave it there and answer further questions as we get to them. So how that RIM test translates into over time is with those payments, even for the systems. So this is just looking at the systems that are installed from now to 2030. You're going to incur a cost for those systems because they have a life of 25 years. So if we look out over the full lifetime of those systems, that's what this is showing here of the cost shift, or in millions, that are going to be shifted from the customers adopting solar to the rest of your customers who are not. You can see that cost shift grows much more dramatically with the net energy metering scenarios 1 and 4. Grows more slowly, but it's still growing even with the net billing tariff under scenarios 2 and 3. So scenarios 2 and 3 help, but certainly don't eliminate that cost shift challenge of distributed solar. So the final 2 slides are essentially our findings and conclusions. So we showed you under our modeling of economic potential, it's theoretically feasible to achieve 10% adoption. 2 caveats. 1, that still comes at a pretty significant cost to your Glendale ratepayers of, if you're looking just at the period from 2024 to 27 of $23 to $45 million. That translates to a rate increase of 4 to 8% in 2027, over and above any other reasons there are going to be rate increases. And then we talked about our study, and this is common for studies like this, are just looking at the modeled costs in order to, so we didn't study the additional program implementation costs, the education and outreach, the advertising that Glendale Water and Power would have to implement to really increase the adoption. And remember, we're talking about increasing adoption from 438 customers a year to over 2,000 customers a year. So there's some additional admin, overhead, marketing, outreach that would go along with that aren't included here. Achieving 10% for storage, we're showing the adoption rates simply does not look feasible by 2027 or even 2030. That puts also a significant challenge on achieving this dispatchable load reduction of 100 megawatts by 2027. I also want to emphasize, we talked about earlier, that in order at the end of the day to have a dispatchable load reduction of 100 megawatts, you'll probably have to install or get customers to enroll over 200 to 300 megawatts. And that could be your Tesla cars, it could be your batteries, but it's just to get that effective capacity, you need to install 2 to 3 times the nameplate capacity. Final slide. Going to hit on this several ways. All the scenarios we studied have a significant rate shift or rate increase. If we look at it in 2030, you're seeing not only a rate increase of 6 to 11%, that translates to a monthly bill increase for low to moderate income customers of $4 to $6 a month on their bill. And then we wanted to, there's 2 caveats. I think Mr. Boleto covered already some of the issues with how you're able to use the public benefits charge and the restrictions from Proposition 26. We really didn't look at that in any detail in our study. And then we've touched on this additional effort to translate what we're finding as technical economic potential to what's actually achievable in the real world. And that takes further study, also specific to the city of Glendale, given your customer mix, what's going to be the most effective in overcoming those barriers and getting customers to adopt solar and storage. One thing I did want to mention, the goal is set in terms of percentage of customers. From our look as utility planners, it could make more sense to define a goal in terms of megawatts, either nameplate or dispatchable capacity, and also to not just think about customer-owned storage, but also think about community solar and storage that can provide similar benefits at a lower cost and provide more access to renters through virtual net metering programs. And that is the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes.
If I could, would you please explain why there's a ratepayer impact a little bit for people who don't understand that? So the rate impact test, can you just explain in real sentences?
So this is hotly debated, and it's been in the news quite a bit. I think part of the reasons this is challenging is there are a lot of people who want to just believe that solar is good. Solar is good. Less expensive solar is even better. And distributed solar on a rooftop that's getting compensated at the retail rate is transferring money essentially today from rich single-family homeowners to the less wealthy renters, because paying the utility rate is including all the cost to operate a utility. And I think, as you know, a lot of those costs are fixed and are not avoided by solar production. So all that revenue that's lost to Glendale has to be made up from other customers, because that's money that they've already spent for the poles, the wires, the staff, that a little bit more solar generation is not avoiding. But those solar customers under net energy metering are avoiding paying for those costs, so those have to come from somebody else.
Could I ask you just to restate, because I think either I misheard or maybe you misspoke, what is the direction of the flow of the subsidy from the wealthier homeowners with rooftop solar vis-a-vis the lower income utility customers?
The direction of the subsidy is the single-family wealthy, largely wealthy homeowners are paying less. That cost shift is then going and being borne by the lower income renters, and that, so it's increasing their bills while it's reducing the bills to the homeowners that are installing solar. Also want to say, distributed solar is more expensive. It does have more benefits being at the end of the distribution system as compared to utility scale solar or community solar. But even if you're very generous in adding up those benefits, it does not offset the additional cost of that solar, and it certainly doesn't make up for the lost revenue by compensating that solar at the full retail rate.
Great, thank you. I believe I have one more presentation that's an element of this item. So let's proceed with that presentation, and then we'll take some questions.
Good afternoon, GWP commissioners and President Fay. My name is Ruzan Soloyan, Clean Energy Officer at GWP. This is my first meeting at the commission, and I look forward to working with all of you and contributing to Glendale's clean energy future. During my part of the presentation, I will discuss about insights gathered from the community and how these insights will inform our approach moving forward, as well as a couple of initiatives that we will be working on implementing in the near future. While the E3 analysis revealed significant challenges in meeting the City Council's goal by 2027, it was critical for GWP to understand the broader community perspective. For that reason, we conducted a survey, and over 2,000 customers responded to this survey, and more than 1,500 customers answered to at least one open-ended question. For instance, affordability emerged as the top priority, and additionally, the survey highlighted communities' concerns regarding rate increases, and GWP will use these insights as guiding principles when designing and implementing new programs and initiatives for the community. It is important to also mention that survey results align with GWP's vision and priorities to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable utility services to Glendale ratepayers. While E3 study concluded that implementing new programs to increase customer adoption rate to 10% by 2027 is very challenging and will result in significant rate increases, it is important to note that single-family homes show a very strong adoption rate, which is 12.2%, and the overall total customer-owned solar systems account for 3.5% of the customer base, with a combined generation capacity of 29.3%. We are also making significant progress in bringing more utility-owned solar projects to the city, and by adding utility-owned solar and power purchase agreements that we will be bringing on board in the near future, our total solar capacity will be over 35 megawatts, and that's 10% of our peak demand. This graph illustrates the current landscape of residential single-family solar installations alongside projections through 2030. And as we see, the trend is clearly upward, reflecting the growing interest in solar energy among homeowners. If we continue with this trend, it is projected that by 2030, 25% of our single-family homes will have solar, and GWP recognizes how important it is to continue drive awareness and support solar adoption in our city. Now let's take a look at this image, which illustrates the solar adoption at a local neighborhood. Anecdotally, I'd like to share a quick story about a friend who recently worked with Sunrun through Costco to explore solar options for their home in Glendale. And as the slide mentions, we're not endorsing any of these companies, just mentioning as a reference. When a resident expressed interest in going solar, they provided her with this very image that shows that 200 neighbors already made the switch with Sunrun, as well as the information on the left side that shows that within a 25-mile radius of their address, there are 24,000 neighbors that adopted solar. It's powerful visual, and by presenting images like these, solar companies effectively highlight local trends and community engagement. This not only helps potential customers visualize successful installations in our city and neighboring cities, but also demonstrates the real-world benefits of solar, creating a sense of trust and encouraging more adoption. With a clear understanding of communities' needs, current solar adoption trends, and E3 study findings, we are positioned to respond to the City Council's goals for increasing distributed generation adoption and developing more demand-side management measures for our customers. To achieve this, we propose leveraging an integrated demand-side management approach. This will help us actively manage and shape energy demand as we transition our customers to cleaner energy future. This strategy promotes behavioral changes, enhances grid reliability, and balances affordability with sustainability. As more people adopt electric vehicles and electrify their homes, it's critical that our customers are not penalized with rate increases, and instead they should benefit from this shift to cleaner and more efficient technologies. Through integrated demand-side management approach, GWP will integrate various program portfolios such as solar, energy storage, electrification, demand response, and more, to manage cost shifts and transition our customers to cleaner technologies. GWP has developed a high-level plan, and our next steps include preparing and sharing a strategic 5-year plan with all proposed programs and initiatives when we present the fiscal year 25-27 program updates to the City Council for approval, which we present at the end of fiscal year. Now let's explore some initiatives and programs that can help with our transition to a clean energy future. Outreach and education are the foundation of all the distributed energy resource efforts. Building strong relationships with our customers through trust and competency is key. By educating them on new technologies and our initiatives, we can guide their transition to cleaner technologies. We are also committed to better understanding our customers' needs so we can empower them and help them transition to cleaner technologies. Lastly, we will expand our outreach on federal and state programs such as Inflation Reduction Act and self-generation incentive program to help our customers leverage external fundings, incentives, tax credits, so they can adopt more clean technologies or energy efficiency measures. GWP will also explore and pursue external funding opportunities and grant opportunities to support our community in making these transitions. While the integrated demand-side management approach covers many priorities, one area that is often overlooked but remains highly relevant is water conservation. Addressing this gap is critical for meeting our community needs, and it will help us enhance our overall demand management strategy. For example, the combined energy required to pump water from Northern California and Colorado River to Southern California is significant, and it represents 6 to 7% of total electricity consumption in the state. And by reducing water demand here in Glendale, we can lower not only energy required to transport water to Glendale, but we can also reduce energy needed to treat and deliver water to homes and businesses. There are also opportunities to shift water usage, especially irrigation, to off-peak periods, which can help reduce strain on our electric grid. In summary, water conservation programs and initiatives have a direct impact on the grid, and GWP can optimize its water conservation programs portfolio to achieve savings across both energy and water resources, enhancing overall resource management. Now let's focus on in-system power purchase agreements and how they can strengthen our renewable energy portfolio in Glendale. In-system power purchase agreements offer a guaranteed price for renewable energy, providing long-term compensation to producers. Unlike net energy metering, which is limited to on-site energy use, in-system power purchase agreements enable developers to fully utilize their solar potential on properties like carports, parking lots that aren't eligible for net metering. The key benefits include increased investments in renewable energy projects and promoting solar and storage in underutilized areas. This timeline shows our implementation plan for in-system power purchase agreements. And upon receiving all the approvals and going through the RFP process, we are expecting to launch the program in early 2026. Here is another program that we are proposing to bring to the community. We plan to bring more energy efficiency rebates to help customers with their upfront costs. And that's going to be through adding additional rebates to our existing rebates program. Here is the implementation plan for launching these rebates, and upon receiving all the necessary approvals, we expect to launch the program in August 2025. In addition to those two programs that I just presented, GWP will also design and implement new comprehensive energy, water audits, and direct installation services to achieve deeper energy water savings for our customers. This program will also help customers identify additional incentives through state and federal agencies, as well as tax credits and GWP, so they can stock different rebates and make their investments in clean energy more affordable. And this plan outlines the timeline to launch the new program, which is projected to happen in January 2026. All these programs are just examples that provide a glimpse into some exciting programs we have on horizon to ensure alignment with GWP's policies and the clean energy section. Staff will develop and present for an approval a 5-year strategic and operational plan that will ensure that the section's goals and objectives align with the broader goals and priorities set by City Council, city leadership, state regulations, and to offer stability and direction to ensure the integrated demand-side management approach will help us manage and shape energy demand as we move toward clean energy future. This plan will include various programs such as solar energy storage, electrification, demand response, and more to manage cost shifts and aim to keep rates as low as possible, making the transition affordable for all Glendale ratepayers. The detailed plan, as I mentioned before, with all the programs will be presented to City Council for approval when we present the fiscal year 25-27 program updates plan at the end of this fiscal year. Initially, we were going to ask for an endorsement from the commission, but we will be coming back to the commission asking for endorsement to recommend that the commission endorse E3 study findings for council approval, as they reveal significant ratepayer impact, and to also ask for an endorsement for these 3 programs that we are planning to implement. So we will be back in November with those recommendations. This concludes my presentation, and we are happy to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gish, would you come forward, please? And just a note of clarification, Commissioner Peterson is going to need to excuse himself around 6 o'clock, so he let me know in advance. Just want to pass that along. Ms. Gish, 3 minutes?
I guess. First of all, thank you, President Fay and the other commissioners, for allowing me to speak. I am extremely disappointed in the E3 results. The slides do not show that E3 has completed key parts of the requirements in the RFP. In particular, E3 was required to develop a plan that had to include many items. Page 20 of the RFP, which resulted in the contract, says the scope of services is as follows. 1, develop a plan to achieve the goal of 10% of GW customers adopting solar and energy storage by 2027. Develop additional demand management measures with a minimum total peak dispatchable peak load, reducing capacity of 100 megawatts by December 31st, 2027. Key sentence next. If the consultant concludes that date to be unattainable, then a date identified soon thereafter. That is nowhere in these presentations. The plan must include policies and incentives. The plan must include an alternative approach with a mix of storage at customer sites and GWP-controlled sites, rather than all storage being located at customer sites. Again, not part of what we heard. The plan must include, at a minimum, the following specific policies and incentives. Maintenance of a robust net metering policy, upfront incentives or rebates on solar installations, upfront rebates combined with ongoing performance-based incentives for battery storage systems, policies specifically aimed to lower-income customers, community solar projects, again, not mentioned. The plan should also include additional incentives and outreach programs for energy efficiency, demand reduction, and shifting energy use to off-peak time periods. Category 2, part of their program as well. Calculate the estimated dispatchable capacity and demand reduction that can be achieved through the plan developed in Category 1. Again, what they wrote was just not achievable. As far as the GWP part of the presentation, there's no way that GWP should ask the Commission to endorse E3's study findings since they did not do the required work on the plan. I'm interested in the suggestions that GWP has on the power purchase agreements, which seem really promising. I'd really like more information, what it might amount to if they got fully implemented, and the same for the other 2 things that they were talking about with rebates and concierge service. We're also interested in how many rebates they've looked at from IRA, SGIP fund, other kinds of funding, and all the details and assumptions that they've put into of what costs, benefits. I mean, there's just not sufficient information here, and they did not do what the statement of work required them to do.
Thank you for sharing that feedback. Perhaps to help address Ms. Gish's concern, is the full set of slides that Scott or Mr. Mellon you alluded to, we're only seeing a small amount here. Is that full set of slides available for public review?
Good afternoon, Scott Mellon, Assistant General Manager, Power Management. It is not at this time. We're looking at releasing it in about a week.
Okay. And that fuller set of slides may still not address all the concerns of the public?
May still not address all the concerns because there's the initial study kind of in the executive summary that we provided kind of points to the massive hurdles that we kind of have to get over before we can get to that point.
Okay, but let's make sure we do share the full set of slides unless there's any reason why we can't do that, and give the public a chance to see the full workup.
Now, the intent is to make sure that the public has full opportunity to digest and ask us questions.
Okay, great, thank you.
May I?
Yes.
May I, just a question related to, what's the timeline? So it seems you guys wanted to come back in November, maybe give a suggestion or a commendation, but then after that, it's going to city council?
Yes.
Has city council set a set deadline saying, I want this by December, or what's the, because I want to see if we've got more time. It seems this is a complicated issue. We're not going to figure it out in 3 weeks, I guess, if we're not going to get the full report in 1 week, and not the full report, the full slides.
Yeah.
We're going to get it in 1 week, and our next meeting is about a month down the road, so that leaves 3 weeks for us to review, learn, understand, figure out, to be able to give any kind of recommendation. I don't want to give a recommendation on something I don't understand.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out the timeline as to when city council needs this information to figure out how much time we have if we're going to give a recommendation after we review and we've given enough time to it.
So currently we're scheduled for November 19th, I believe, is the Tuesday that we're taking it to council. Our goal was to give it an opportunity to get in front of council before the end of the calendar year. I think that was our primary goal. I know E3, we have them here, we have them on contract for only a certain amount of time, obviously. So, yes, I think ultimately we'd like to have some closure on it and be able to address some of the bigger concerns, like implementing some of the recommended programs that we have and that we're putting together. I can definitely speak to a couple of the examples, especially the PPA, if you have some conversation, if you have some questions there. But the goal, I think, was to have some closure with council before the end of the calendar year.
Okay, if we can get the full report, at least for this commission, in enough time for us to kind of review it, digest it, have some questions to staff if we need to, indirectly or directly, and then maybe we'll be in a position to give a recommendation or not. I don't know. That's all I'm saying.
You know, having worked through this and having worked with my team on this, it's quite a bit of information to digest, and we recognize that, you know, obviously we didn't want to put this all on you today and say yes or no, right? That doesn't make any sense. So, you know, a month, we were hoping a month would give you enough time. Recognize that in November you would still have an additional opportunity to talk to us about any additional questions you have. If there was anything during the month that you could that you wanted to consider, or any ideas that came up in your mind during that time, you could ask us in November also. But part of the reason why we're here is we're here to get your recommendations and suggestions. Right. So we're open to that.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Robledo?
Yeah, I'd like to ask E3 if they could explain a little bit more about their conclusion or their finding that the 100 megawatts was not feasible. Is that because customers were not incentivized, or maybe you can explain that a little bit deeper?
Simply looking at we were looking at solar and storage, and looking at that low storage adoption rate that you experience around California, and that's due in large part, A, to the high cost of those storage systems, and B, relatively low economic payback for the customers.
Maybe you can explain that a little more, why it's a low payback.
So to date, it appears customers are buying those systems primarily for their own backup power and resiliency, which is a benefit, but it's a benefit to them, not to the rest of the community. Unless there are time of use rates that really incentivize more savings during the on-peak period and lower cost during the off-peak period, that's what provides a benefit to those customers for having storage, to be able to move that solar generation into the periods where they can essentially save the most money by reducing their energy consumption during the more expensive on-peak periods.
Okay.
So you don't have those time of use rates currently in Glendale or in a number of cities in California. So that
So-
economic proposition for storage remains the customer resiliency and the customer backup.
In other jurisdictions, is it cost effective, or it's just not, just in Glendale that's not cost effective?
No, it's not cost effective, due to the high cost of those systems. So there's a bit more of a payback to the customers where you have those time of use rates, so like PG&E, their on-peak rate is over 1.5 times their off-peak rate. So being able to shift that solar from the middle of the day to the evening increases the payback. But still, even that doesn't pay for the storage. So it's remains an early adoption market.
Okay. I'd like to address the community solar. So we have utility-owned solar, and that's at our solar complex and at the Brand landfill.
Right, that's one of, well, the sports complex is one of 6 programs or locations that we're looking at, 6 projects. Yeah, the Brand landfill, we have 2 other parks. I'm trying to remember the other 2, but right off the top of my head, it's about.
So community-owned solar is solar that's put in public locations or locations that accessible, and then the power it goes into the utility side of the grid. This is power that we use along with our gas plant, and we dispatch it, and we have control over it.
Yeah.
So the PPA program is essentially a community solar program, because it would be us paying for the power output. Los Angeles was successful at this. They call it the feed-in tariff program, but power purchase agreement is more it's closer to what we're doing, where we'd have an arm's length relationship with someone who has parking lot space or someone who wants to put in solar, and we would pay. It's a pretty penny.
Yeah.
I think is it
Well,
public what we're?
No, not yet. So
Okay.
we will be bringing.
But even in Los Angeles, their feed-in tariff was about 30% more than what their average cost was. But it provides an incentive to get it in here. But it's not a perverse incentive like the NEM. NEM, net energy metering, avoids our distribution costs. So the non-participants pay for basically the free riders in the net energy metering. And when you go to the net billing tariff for the NEM3, it eliminates that, because now the solar energy cannot be stored. You can't overproduce in summer and take it back out in winter. When you take summer energy out in winter, then it's being provided by some other plant, and they're not really paying for the cost of the reliability that they enjoy by being connected to the grid. Right now, the lights are on, but the solar's off, the sun's out. And I know you can address it with batteries, but still there are, as E3 showed, that there are subsidies from the non-participants to the participants, and the power purchase agreement is a better model, we think, for us to promote than to us to promote something that is unfair to some of our customers. And we feel good about it. Now, having said that, you can move to the other slide, the other way. That one, okay. Single-family residences, we just did a case study showing that there are some benefits with energy metering, and we stay in the current trend, it's going to happen naturally. So this is not us forcing people to do it, because us forcing people to do it would be advantaging one population against another. But this is customers taking advantage of net energy metering that is available, and it will naturally continue, as we've seen, without us having to push it. And I think if it got to a certain level, then we would need rate adjustments. But part of our plan is to let this continue. And the multifamily doesn't have the same roofs that single-family, but single-family residents will go well beyond the council's goal of 10%. It's going up to 25%. And with the power purchase agreements, we can hopefully combine power purchase agreements and net energy metering. We can have a combined penetration that would be significant, much more than equivalent 10%. And so that's the plan for solar that we're proposing, to have continuation of the net energy metering in some form, and then promotion of the power purchase agreements.
Thank you. Commissioner Jasper-Darian, any questions? Okay. All right, so I have a few questions for you guys. You mentioned payback periods. I think in your presentation, we heard 5 to 7, up to 9. What is the industry benchmark for an effective or reasonable payback period for residential solar or any other kind of solar investment?
It's somewhat subjective. In the utility, I'll say the utility side of the industry, 7 to 9. So when it was the legislature directed the CPUC to have a reasonable, wasn't specifically a reasonable payback period, but it was an economic market for. They interpreted that after some discussions of trying to be below 10 years or somewhere around 10 years, whereas the then existing NEM was more like 5 to 7 years.
And the idea is that the solar system that's installed has a 20 to 30 year life. It pays for itself in less than 10 years and is a net positive thereafter.
And a net positive thereafter. And customers, even if it pays for itself in 25 years, most customers need a shorter payback period to, make that upfront capital investment or just devote the time to. So you do see a hurdle of a payback period of 7 to 9 years or so for, to get good uptake on residential customers. And so that was the balance the commission was trying to say, like, can we lower the payback, raise the payback period so there's still a viable industry, but it reduces the cost shift, and that's where getting to something, and I think they were looking at 9 years. Now, rates have gone up since then, so the payback period has gone back down.
Sure.
With rate increases.
Yeah, and I think the payback period is a good model to think about this, because it does account for changing interest rates, changing utility rates, changing prices of solar. So I think it would be a helpful metric, at least for me and maybe for my colleagues in the city council, to think about what is the likely payback period on different categories of solar projects based on the recommendations that you're offering. And I think you guys can probably do the math to come up with some ideas of that. And I think that would be a helpful way to communicate this, and because there's a lot of variables. But if we say the payback period under the current system is 8.5 years and under the proposed system it's 8.9, we can all see that that's a very modest change, right? So.
Yeah, and it's going to vary quite a bit by the different customer classes. So our modeling does have all that. And in fact, a lot of the modeling is based on an adoption rate driven in part, not entirely, by the payback period. So if the payback period is shorter, the model higher adoption. So that, I believe that's in the full report, but I'm not sure specifically the payback period, but we can add that easily.
Maybe something that we can do for the next time we revisit this, or before releasing the full documents, is put a little more emphasis on that. I think it might be a clearer metric.
Well, it's probably important to note that one of the reasons why payback periods were identified and was figuring out how to manage NEM 1, NEM 2, and transition to MBT, right? That was to make sure that those who had committed to, like, say, NEM 1, which is where the state we're in right now, in Glendale, could see and realize that payback, and then through a grandfathering process, and then transition into whatever the next NEM stage was supposed to be. Because no one believes that there was ever an intent that NEM 1 should be the only version. Right? Like everything else that we're doing, we're learning the process. So the state has transitioned from NEM 1 to NEM 2, from NEM 2 to NBT, and there's a reason. Right?
And we may have to transition in a similar way, right?
Absolutely.
And how has the state handled that transition for existing agreements or existing customers who signed up for NEM 1, are they locked into that commitment for the life of their system?
No, well, that's part of the conversation, right? I think different utilities are attempting to handle it differently, but I think they all realize they've got to find a way to grandfather and end. And that's where that recognizing industry number for return on investment, basically.
So I think that's another important thing for us to clarify or communicate very clearly is for Glendale customers who have invested in solar, who have invested 5 figures into a rooftop solar system, that they know that the deal they sign up for is good in perpetuity, or it's good for the next 10 years or whatever it is. So I think that's something that we should be very clear to make sure is understandable for all the customers who've kind of joined us on this journey, that we're not going to change the terms of the game for them.
That's our intention. I think there's a time limit. I could stand corrected, but I think it's 20 years. So they, for example, I have a friend who has a solar system in Palm Springs, and it went with the house, and he has NEM1 for 20 years, but new customers are in whatever version they're offering. And we would do that. If someone committed to solar under NEM1, we haven't established an end date, but we may do that as part of, if we do transition to one of the other, we'll establish an end date for the grandfathered systems.
Great. I think there was a really interesting point that came up in this discussion, and 10%, having worked in and around government for a while, whenever I see a nice round number, I immediately get a little bit skeptical of it, because the world doesn't work in nice round numbers that way. But I think the intent of the City Council's policy was clear, that we want to be ambitious, we want to move directionally towards a cleaner energy future. But I think, even if we hold on to 10% as the numerical goal, what 10% of what, right?
Yes.
And I think that was an interesting question here. And I would like the next time we come back for the department to recommend what you think the right metric, 10% of whatever. Is it number of customers? Meaning number of households, number of businesses, number of accounts. To me, that's seems a little simplistic, because a big business uses a lot more power than a small household, right? Yeah. Is it the peak power demand, kind of the nameplate capacity of a system and of our peak summer usage, which maybe is easier to digest, but I think the more relevant or important metric is the total kilowatt hours, megawatt hours that the city of Glendale uses in a given year. But you guys have thoughts on that probably, and that might be a useful recommendation to come back to us and the council and say, we agree directionally, this is the metric we think that the city should be using to guide this process. And if it's different than what was in the original directive, I think state the case, and you can probably explain it and convince people of that. So I think that would be a way to improve this as well. Couple more on slide 14 of the E3 presentation. I'll just jump back to there. In this cost comparison, does this account from a financial accounting perspective of for congested transmission, for bringing utility scale solar, which we can't do in the basin because it's an urban area? Is that accounted for here?
No. So to be clear, this is what's called an installed cost at the site. So including the financing of the site. But that, when I alluded to, there were benefits of the local storage, whether it's community or customer owned. That would be, like in this kind of analysis, counted on the benefit side, that it's producing power in the basin, you're not incurring those losses, and you're not incurring those transmission costs.
Is there a way we can try to quantify that? Because putting that on the kind of positive side of the ledger, but with a fuzzy non-value, I think doesn't properly represent how important that is. Because what I've heard a lot is that, even if we wanted to build all the solar farms in the world, there's not enough wires to get the power into Glendale. And so that means that if we look at that, technical capacity or technical potential, you studied it for the rooftops in Glendale. What is the technical potential for utility scale solar outside of Glendale?
Be delivered to Glendale.
It's probably relatively small. I would think that's a useful thing to compare. And maybe you can switch to that chart. I don't remember which page it was on, that we showed the pie charts for the various facilities. Looks like 13. So let me just go back one more. this rooftop solar potential, 132 megawatts for commercial industrial, 95 for single family, and 86 for multifamily. What is the technical potential of solar outside of Glendale, given the transmission limitations, given the market competition to build on the number of sites, environmental restrictions on the best sites? That is not a limitless resource. It is very constrained. And I think given where we want to go at 100% clean energy, we might use all that up and still not be there. And then we have to build out our own local resources. And I think we're not accurately reflecting that in the plan. It seems, to be honest, like we're sandbagging a little bit, that we're better off building bigger things, which I think makes sense from a cost effectiveness on a kilowatt basis. But if we can't build those big things because there's nowhere to build them, or we can't get the power in, it doesn't matter if that's a better deal. It's not available to us. And I don't know that that's properly reflected here. So just a bit of feedback for you guys in any revisions or changes.
All right, so if you mind, I have a couple points I'd like to make on. If you can go back to the previous slide, yeah. So you bring up some good, valid points, absolutely. But I think there's a little bit of missing information from this too. When we go through the process of looking for where we can build something or where we can interconnect, one of the things Glendale does is we look at existing transmission. We look at points where we actually have the ability to trade. We look at the path flow for that energy. When a vendor comes to us and proposes an installation, usually it's through a joint action, right? We have other people that are doing it with us. We narrow the scope down on multiple projects to areas that we can actually get the energy into us. So that's part of our calculation already. We wouldn't engage in that project unless we didn't already have a pathway home. There is a question, definitely, about how often those projects go to fruition. There's an incredible amount of weightlifting we do leading up to and getting any one of 10s, 20s, 30s of these projects through fruition and energy delivered.
And then delivering what they've committed to deliver, right?
So the relationship to transmission, we've kind of worked that out. The relationship to fully functional vendors who can actually start with a bid, meet their numbers, generate a term sheet, fill out an agreement to build the site, not have any issues with delivery of equipment, and turn that energy on, that falls off rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And even within the system, everyone thinks they can do it until they try. So there are some significant hurdles, regardless of where the location is for the solar installations, because it's not as simple to build, it's not as simple to buy, and it's not as simple to deliver as everyone thinks it is.
Sure, absolutely. Yes.
I think Thomas Sowell said, without innovation, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. So I know that the conventional wisdom is we can't import, but there is a possibility of upgrading the transmission line between Glendale and Burbank to a higher capacity line. And there is the possibility of negotiating with Los Angeles to upgrade their facilities. And given the results of this study, those should be looked at in comparison to this. And it's not to say we're not going to do solar, but it's to say that we're going to do our best with solar, but we have to look at other options too. And this is true, that the sun, it's sunnier in the desert than it is in Glendale. So you have a 30% conversion versus 18% conversion. Now you have to deal with the transmission, okay? There's a bottleneck in Adelanto. You could build storage there. So you charge the storage there, and then you have 100% usage of the transmission coming in. So these are things that we would like to explore in comparison to forcing everyone in Glendale. We want to encourage it, but we wouldn't want to force it.
And I think the point about the cross subsidy is well taken, and I think that's something that most people, I think, see is kind of inherently unfair, right? But I think if we come back to the origin of this, and this was really, I think, a grassroots measure that Advocates pushed the city council to consider this, and the city council adopted this. My understanding is this was not a let's make a giveaway to single-family homeowners to put solar on their rooftop. It's how do we improve Glendale's use of clean solar energy, right? And so if what I'm kind of sounds like the recommendation from the department is we want to do that too, but the more cost-effective way to do that is on larger scale carports at commercial parking lots or at sports fields or things like that. We'll let the single-family roofs continue on their trend. I think that's a fine suggestion to put out, as long as it gets us towards the goal. But I was a little unclear, having read through this in advance and seeing the presentation, what the E3 recommendation is. And I think the feedback from the public reflects that as well. I respect all the analysis, the S1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know all the math behind that, but I think we need to be very clear in saying, what is the recommendation?
Right. Well, I think the recommendations coming from the department, I think what the E3 has findings. So we're going to take their findings and we'll come up with a recommendation.
Yeah, and I think let's just make that on one slide. It's very clear. It says, and maybe the recommendation is, this is all too expensive. We can't afford it. Let's do this instead. That's a recommendation. But it's not, it's a little bit muddled as it stands right now.
That's not our recommendation.
And then the last thing is, I think, the broader industry is moving this in the right direction. Solar panels, the components are getting cheaper and cheaper. People are using them as fences and on balconies. So that's all, kind of moving this in the right direction. But there's a lot of other things that go into these projects beyond the solar modules themselves, right? So.
I'd like to take a second. At NEM1, currently, and from our look at what vendors are offering, like you walk out of Home Depot or Costco with a power purchase agreement, or they call it a lease, where you have a fixed amount, guaranteed production, there is no payback. It's instant payback. Because you're not fronting the money, you're only, you're signing up for a 25-year commitment to buy power at a certain rate for a flat rate. I think there's less value if we change to a different model where they don't get to use their summer energy in winter, so that there'll be less value. But basically, you can get this on a lease or a power purchase agreement where you don't have to front the money and get a payback calculation.
Sure. And the last question I have is the idea for the PPA that will offer a fixed price and say anyone who wants to deliver at this price, we will fund projects up to some amount, or we'll be soliciting bids and asking developers to give us their price?
I'll speak to the intent that we have right now. We've been working with one particular vendor because they've been very helpful with us, and we've been working through developing our PPA agreement with them and term sheets. It's, we're very well versed in working through purchase power agreements external to our system. It's a different animal internal to the system, different obligations. In that, we're willing to accept a certain level of pricing from them because of what we're going through. But we are planning on putting out an RFP, requesting people, this is kind of the construct that we're looking at. If anyone wants to fit that construct, come on and apply. We will have to review each one on a case-by-case basis, simply because where they connect has differing effects. Right? And part of the PPA price that power management would be paying is going to be taking off the prices for the interconnection that electrical services is going to charge. So that'll be rolled up in PPA prices, but it'll be different for each installation. So we do have to consider a possible range. We haven't defined that range yet, but we're willing to grab as much as the low-hanging fruit as possible when we address this. And we're going to give opportunities to vendors if they don't make the cut in the first year. We're going to be doing this on a yearly basis. Every year, we're going to issue an RFP and say, come on, come all. So
and the idea is this would be a single program structure that would have multiple vendors participating at different project sites?
That's my intent, yes.
Okay. And then thinking back to, I think we did an RFP for DER resources a couple of years ago, and I think we got, 0 or very few bidders.
Yeah.
So I think the takeaway there is the terms really matter, and I'm glad to hear we're working with a vendor to make sure that what we put out is going to be, palatable to them
Yes.
and to others. So
Yeah, and then for our benefit, doing a PPA allows us to integrate these installations into our planning models. So it helps us understand where we might need to do upgrades in our system, or where we might be able to avoid upgrades in our system. Whereas under the FIT structure, that's not the case.
great. Well, thank you very much. I know this has been a long meeting, so a very meaty agenda item, and I would put this right up there with the integrated resource plan for heavy math and lots of dependencies. So I'm glad we're giving it the time it needs to breathe, for us to consider, for sufficient public input. And I think at the next meeting, we can come back and make a recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll wrap up that item.
We have a speaker for 5A.
On the phone?
Yes.
Okay, let's take the speaker.
Ms. Monica Campana, you're on air. You have 3 minutes. Ms. Monica? Ms. Monica, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
I know we heard from her earlier, so maybe she consolidated her comments, and or if there's a technical issue, Monica, please call in again.
And we have no more callers.
Can we move to the agenda forecast? So this is item 6. Mr. Robledo, maybe you can walk us through what is the plan kind of for the rest of the year for our meetings?
Yes. So our, November 4th, we'll be revisiting this report for the solar recommendation. And then on October 2nd, we're going to have a year in review, as I alluded to earlier, along with key performance indicators from each division, so we can get a feel of our performance, how we're doing. I think what's helpful with that is we'll try and have a several-year trend, so we can see if we're doing better or worse, or the same.
Great. And I think that was December 2nd. You
Yes,
meant to say?
December
Great.
2nd. I think that's, and then the next year, we are not going to have a meeting in January, but in February, we'll have a legislative update.
One comment I had, and I don't know if this is a legal issue, but it seems like the formula by which we schedule these meetings on the first Monday of the month positions us to have a lot of conflicts with holidays or vacations or things like that. And maybe by the next meeting, we can look into what is the process to reevaluate that or reassess. Maybe the first Monday of the month is not a good time to schedule these meetings if we intend to have them every month. Between 4th of July, New Year's, all that kind of stuff, we seem to lose 2 or 3 a year.
Sure, President Fay, Commission members. I know that going way back in history, GWP Commission meetings have been on the first Monday. I will certainly look into it to see if perhaps the charter or the Glendale Municipal Code says the first Monday of each month. However, notwithstanding that, even if that's the case, that there's something that says it has to be on the first Monday, if the commission so desires, we can always hold a special meeting. If we see a Monday falls on a holiday, by all means, we can have a special meeting. We'll have to clear dates, because I know Tuesday's council meeting day, they have afternoon sessions and evening sessions, perhaps on a Wednesday or a Thursday if there's no conflict. So there is nothing that prohibits us from having special meetings, but I will definitely look into to see if it's mandated to be on the first Monday.
Right. And, just because it's a special meeting doesn't mean we can't plan it out months in advance to make sure it works for everybody's.
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank
That's
you.
correct.
President Fay, we have a Monica online again.
Okay, Monica's back. Let's go to Monica.
Okay. Monica, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was holding for the other item still, so I apologize. Actually, my comment was about the recycled water. I just wanted to mention that I know that a lot of the GUSD schools, a few of them are already on the system. There's one big connection where the purple pipe made it all the way up to Hoover, but I think the funding ran out for the school district. They didn't have enough money, and it was the recent quote was somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 or something for them to do the work that would be required for the recycled water to make it on campus and be able to water their athletic field. That site in particular, at Hoover, it's on a hill, you know, and Toll is underneath of it. So it would hit to Hoover, Toll, and I believe Keppel. It would be a very valuable place to have recycled water. So I don't know if there's a way to look at how you can work with the school district to help them perhaps attain more funding to complete that job. And then also working with the pipes that go to Fremont Park and other Verdugo, the park in Verdugo Woodlands. There's I'm sure that's going to be on your master plan. And then thank you for doing that. I think it's really important work that you're doing there. And I just wanted to say one more thing about the E3 presentation, and that was that, we determined that, once we did not decide to install as much gas at Grayson as originally intended, we saw what the need was based on how much transmission you have coming in from both of your lines, the transmission that can come in from Elon, and you saw what the hole was that needed to be filled, and you know that you need to get this done anyway because as you reach for these state goals, it has to be done. So we said, okay, there's only so much we can bring in. We have to work local. I don't think the intention was that it has to be one way or another in terms of single-family homes doing it, or if it could be multifamily buildings working together in a VPP or a large-scale commercial program. I don't think that how it happens is what the issue is. I think that it's just a matter of getting that dispatchable capacity that be stored in batteries for those moments in the summer when you really need it, so that you don't have to pay for power outside of the municipality. And we have it for reliability reasons if we ever have an earthquake or anything like that that disrupts transmission, or a fire on one of your lines, which happens frequently. So it's the local part that I think that we just need to keep remembering is what we're trying to work out here. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. It's been one of our busier meetings for public comment, so thank you to everybody who's joined us or called in. I think with that, we can take a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
I second.
All right, I'll join you and vote to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.